Thank you again, Director Keith, for that very kind introduction. And thanks to the COPS Office, as well as to Chuck Wexler and the Police Executive Research Forum for the invitation to join you today. It's a real privilege for me to be here on behalf of the U.S. Department of Justice. As the nation's primary federal law enforcement agency, the Justice Department enforces and defends the laws of the United States, protects the public against foreign and domestic threats, and provides national and international leadership in preventing and investigating crime. Technological innovation has created new opportunities for our law enforcement officers to effectively and efficiently tackle these important issues. At the same time, such innovation poses new challenges for ensuring that technology is used in a manner consistent with our laws and our values, and equally important, with the support and trust of the American people. Facial recognition technology, or FRT, is at the forefront of these developments. For law enforcement, facial recognition technology promises a number of benefits, many of which, like providing leads for crime solving and reuniting missing children with their families, have been discussed throughout this forum. When FRT is used according to professional standards and within appropriate limitations, it can help law enforcement to react quickly and effectively to emerging threats and to conduct more efficient investigations. It can also have hugely impactful health, business, and commercial applications, though I won't be focusing on those non-law enforcement uses today. And yet it's undisputed that certain applications of FRT raise legitimate questions about the extent to which the use of new technology can remain consistent with our society's commitment to privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. I'd like to use my time with you to discuss how the Department of Justice, particularly the FBI, uses facial recognition technology. While the details are important, what really matter are the underlying principles that inform our use of this technology. The Justice Department began funding face detection and recognition research nearly a quarter century ago. We remain committed to the federal government's broader investment in building better algorithms, and especially by capitalizing on the rapid advance of machine learning tools in just the past few years. But even as we support the cutting edge of research, and even as we deploy new capabilities that will assist us in fulfilling our duty to protect the American people, our use of FRT remains fundamentally conservative. The FBI does not, for example, use FRT for real-time identification or surveillance. Neither does it use this technology as a means of positive identification without corroborating evidence. A trained human being is always in the loop. The FBI uses the technology to produce investigative leads, but nothing more. Ultimately, the key is trust. And while it might seem counterintuitive in connection with fast-moving technologies like FRT, trust often finds a refuge in the gray, bureaucratic prose of privacy impact assessments, work logs, compliance audits, and training manuals. That is, in the everyday grammar of the accountability and transparency structures that we, as a free people, demand of our government in order to preserve our liberty, ensure that we're treated equitably, and promote the rule of law. It is those structures and the principles that give them the spark of life that I'll discuss with you today. Now, FRT raises a number of novel questions implicating public safety, individual privacy, and technological change. But this is not the first time that our society has grappled with these types of questions. Our nation's history is replete with examples where our government, our courts, and our civil society have explored how our expectations of privacy evolve, along with technological innovation. Over the past 50 years in particular, our courts have confronted a number of cases involving law enforcement's use of technology to advance criminal investigations. Of course, before many of these questions came before the courts, they had been debated in state and local lawmaking bodies, as well as in the U.S. Congress. FRT is no different. Some state and local lawmakers already have taken steps to begin addressing this issue, and several bills have been introduced in the U.S. Congress. Thus, while the use of FRT may eventually come before the courts as a constitutional question, as citizens in a self-governing society, we have an important duty to confront and to debate the complex questions that this technology raises in the first instance. Thanks to facial recognition, tasks that would take countless hours, like combing through large databases of photos, biometric data, or other personally identifiable information already in the government's lawful possession, can be accomplished in a fraction of that time at much lower cost. It goes without saying how such advancements can assist law enforcement. At the same time, fears of inaccuracy, the potential for unintended performance differentials reflecting ethnicity or racial characteristics, and concerns about mass surveillance have inspired many calls for strict regulatory action. State and local governments across the country are in the process of determining for themselves how best to address law enforcement use of facial recognition. Some governmental entities, including in San Francisco, Boston, Oakland, and just last week, Portland, have gone so far as to ban local agencies' use of this technology. The use, or more accurately, the misuse, of facial recognition technology in other parts of the world has no doubt exacerbated concerns here in the United States. Numerous public reports suggest, for instance, that the Chinese Communist Party takes advantage of facial recognition to assist in its oppression of the Chinese people. Chinese officials use facial recognition in public spaces to identify and track dissidents, activists, and other individuals who are of political interest to the regime. The Chinese government is also reportedly using FRT to suppress minorities, such as the Uyghur and Tibetan populations, in the name of national security. Moreover, the use of FRT by authoritarian nations like China and Russia to enforce quarantines shows how these governments justify dragnet surveillance even outside of the purported law enforcement and national security contexts, and raises very important questions about the persistence of such all-encompassing surveillance measures even once the pandemic has subsided. Europe is in the midst of an intense debate about these issues as well. Both Sweden and France have had high-profile cases in which the use of FRT in schools to monitor students' attendance was struck down. Meanwhile, reports suggest that Germany is considering using live automated FRT in train stations and airports throughout the country for security purposes, even as, just last month, the Court of Appeal of England and Wales struck down a local police force's use of that technology, in which it openly deployed around 50 times over 2 years at a variety of large public events. Now, some in the European Union have called for an outright ban on FRT, while others have advocated for its substantially increased deployment in both commercial and safety applications. Perhaps reflecting the deep and unresolved complexities of the public policy debate concerning this technology, the European Commission's recently published white paper on artificial intelligence makes virtually no mention of FRT at all, which is a remarkable turnabout from an initial draft of the white paper, which had proposed an outright ban on the technology for between 3 to 5 years. In India, the Supreme Court has struck down portions of the national identity system, which incorporates facial recognition among numerous other biometric ID technologies. The court upheld the mandatory use of the system for tax purposes, but prohibited its mandatory use by commercial entities in certain contexts where privacy and risks were involved. Meanwhile, A widely publicized press report from 2018 stated that the Delhi police traced nearly 3,000 missing children in the span of a mere 4 days, thanks to a trial use of FRT. So these are just a few examples of the varied discussions going on around the globe and around our nation regarding the proper use and the proper role of facial recognition technology in society. The Department of Justice recognizes the value of these discussions, and we understand the significant concerns giving rise to them. We also strongly believe that adopting outright bans or moratoriums on the use of FRT by law enforcement in the United States is not a useful approach. Not only do such bans deprive the American people of the clear benefits of this technology in the short term, but they also disrupt the development of better and safer ways for facial recognition to be developed, tested, and deployed in the future. It's a false dichotomy to think that we have to choose between embracing this emerging technology and abandoning our moral compass. To the contrary, we can advance emerging technology in a way that reflects our values of freedom, human rights, and respect for human dignity. The United States should be a leader in FRT and the issues surrounding it precisely so that we can help establish the norms and standards that will shape this technology in the decades ahead. Otherwise, nations and entities that share neither our values nor our constraints will happily and aggressively fill the void. But that's not to say that we should blindly move forward with widespread adoption of FRT without proper consideration for the risks involved. A careful, incremental approach that appropriately balances costs and benefits is the best way forward. Our government has already embarked on this path. Consistent with the President's executive order titled Maintaining American Leadership in Artificial Intelligence, and the Office of Management and Budget's proposed principles regarding the regulation and oversight of artificial intelligence applications developed and deployed outside of the federal government, our nation's strategy on achieving leadership in AI technologies can be realized only by ensuring public engagement, limiting regulatory overreach, and promoting trustworthy technology. At the Department of Justice, 5 core principles guide our approach to facial recognition technology. These non-exhaustive principles help ensure that we appropriately and responsibly implement FRT specifically and AI technologies broadly, consistent with our obligations to protect privacy, civil liberties, and civil rights. The first principle is this: the Department will develop and use facial recognition technology only pursuant to and in accordance with constitutional protections, applicable federal laws, and department policy. When considering the U.S. government's use of facial recognition, it's important to note the significant requirements imposed by existing laws and policies, particularly with regard to the protection of individual privacy. These laws and policies set us apart from other entities that are struggling with the implementation of FRT and are an essential part of any analysis of the costs and benefits of its use by federal law enforcement. For instance, the Privacy Act of 1974, as amended, as well as other relevant statutes, strike an important balance between the government's need to maintain information about individuals and those individuals' privacy rights, while requiring transparency in how federal agencies secure and maintain lawfully collected biometric images like palm prints or facial images or iris images for civil, criminal, and/or national security purposes. The FBI's Facial Analysis, Comparison, and Evaluation, or FACE, services use of FRT provides a useful example of how existing laws and policies can help strike the right balance. FACE services employees support FBI investigators by comparing the facial images of persons associated with open assessments and investigations against the facial images available in state and federal face recognition systems. This point bears repeating. The FBI investigator can send face services a photograph, called a probe photo, only of persons who are subjects of or are relevant to an already open assessment, preliminary investigation, or full investigation, as those terms have long been defined in the Attorney General's guidelines for domestic FBI operations. Moreover, the probe photos themselves must have been collected pursuant to applicable legal authorities as part of an authorized FBI investigation. For instance, FBI policy prohibits the submission of photos of individuals exercising rights guaranteed by the First Amendment, like lawful assembly or free exercise of religion, unless those actions are pertinent to and within the scope of authorized law enforcement activity. Now, upon receipt of the probe photo, face services employees use face recognition software to compare the photo against photos contained within government systems, such as FBI databases, other federal databases, and state photo repositories, under the terms of an applicable Memorandum of Understanding with each state or federal agency. After comparison and evaluation, face services may identify photos that are matches to the probe photo. The likely match photos are called candidate photos. Now, candidate photos serve only as investigative leads. Unlike fingerprints, FBI's face recognition results do not constitute positive identification of an individual. The candidate photos are then sent to the FBI investigator, who is prohibited from relying solely upon them to conduct law enforcement action. Instead, he or she must perform additional investigation to determine if the person in the candidate photo is the same person as in the probe photo. All of these protections, along with advanced training requirements and robust auditing capabilities, enhance the accountability of the system. This, in turn, increases the likelihood of success stories, of which there are many. I can publicly discuss one notable example. In 2017, the FBI identified and arrested an MS-13 member and murderer who had evaded authorities for over 6 years, thereby earning a place on the 10 most wanted fugitives list. Face services played a critical role in helping agents track the fugitive killer down, as photos that he and a woman he was associated with had posted on social media yielded matches that, in turn, provided investigators with a physical location to surveil. There, agents confronted the killer and apprehended him without incident. Last year, he pled guilty to his crimes and was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Now, as with any other investigatory technique, the FBI's use of facial recognition technology during the course of an investigation must have a valid purpose, consistent with the Attorney General's guidelines, and must comply with the Constitution and with all applicable statutes, executive orders, and Department of Justice regulations and policies. Moreover, the information technologies used by face services are properly documented in publicly available privacy impact assessments, which spell out in considerable detail the privacy risks associated with face services use of FRT, and describes the practices and controls that the FBI has implemented in order to mitigate those risks so the public can benefit from the technology's use. And finally, we regularly test, evaluate, and improve the relevant policies and procedures as technology continues to evolve. Notably, an audit revealed that through December 2018, face services employees had performed nearly 300,000 searches on a variety of databases. All of these searches were made in support of active FBI investigations with no findings of civil liberties violations or evidence of system misuse. the second principle that informs how we use FRT. In making its facial recognition technology resources available to other law enforcement agencies, the Department of Justice will insist that those agencies use these resources at a similarly high standard, with appropriate safeguards. We at the DOJ set a high bar in the use of FRT, and we share a large number of resources in common with our law enforcement partners around the nation. In making our resources available to those agencies, we will require those agencies to use these resources at a similarly high level of responsibility and accountability. The FBI's management of its Next Generation Identification Interstate Photo System, or NGI-IPS, is a prime example. The NGI system serves as the FBI's biometric, identity, and criminal history record system, and maintains the fingerprints and associated identity information of individuals submitted to the FBI for authorized criminal justice, security, national security, and civil purposes. This system features a capability by which over 43 million photos are available for facial recognition searching by law enforcement agencies around the nation. State, local, tribal, and federal law enforcement can submit and enroll photos of arrestees based upon probable cause and supported by 10-print fingerprints into the NGI-IPS. These agencies can access the facial recognition search capability that the FBI provides, thereby leveraging the cutting-edge algorithm that the FBI employs, but only if they comply with policy regarding use of the system that the FBI requires of its own employees. In addition, the FBI imposes training requirements in line with national guidelines before users can conduct searches on the system, and requires jurisdictions to meet rigorous technical standards before they can access it. Overall, like Face Services' use of FRT, law enforcement use of the NGI-IPS system should give the American people confidence. An audit revealed that from fiscal year 2017 through April 2019, authorized law enforcement users made over 150,000 facial recognition search requests of the NGI-IPS repository. During that time, there were no findings of civil liberties violations or evidence of system misuse. Third principle, the department will ensure that facial recognition technology is developed and used in a manner that minimizes inaccuracy and unfair biases. Improper discrimination has no place in our society, let alone in our law enforcement function. It's unlikely we can achieve perfection in any endeavor in which imperfect human beings play a role. But we must do everything in our power to employ mitigation techniques so that any errors or demographic differentials are minimized and addressed. In the FRT context, this effort is already well underway throughout the U.S. government. For instance, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, has developed a number of reports from its face recognition vendor test program that focus on issues like the accuracy of vendor-tested facial recognition models. Notably, NIST's work covers demographic differentials, and its most recent report on this topic, published late last year, contains a number of important observations in this context that I'd encourage each of you to review. We have a moral obligation to study demographic differentials in connection with FRT. We in the federal government will continue to ensure that demographic differentials and inaccuracies are constantly being tested, quantified, and mitigated using an evidence-based approach. In fact, it's precisely that approach that led to the progress reflected in the 2018 NIST Face Recognition Vendor Test, in which top algorithms experienced a failure on NIST-provided data inputs only 0.2% of the time, compared with a 4% failure rate in 2014 an improvement by a factor of 20 in only 4 short years. Through its partnership with NIST, the FBI in 2019 upgraded its NGI-IPS algorithm. The selected vendor's facial recognition algorithm performs, currently, at an accuracy rate that exceeds 99%. Going forward, the FBI plans, in collaboration with NIST, to test its NGI-IPS facial technology annually. Much work remains to be done, but the remarkable progress we've seen in the accuracy of FRT in just a few years is cause for optimism. Fourth principle: the Department of Justice will continue to ensure human involvement in any aspect where technology is used in a manner that impacts fundamental rights and civil liberties. As I've stated, our view is that FRT assists, but does not replace, the work conducted by our law enforcement investigators and national security personnel. Accordingly, we believe that a human being should be involved before any actions are taken that could deprive a person of his or her civil rights or civil liberties based on any inputs produced by facial recognition or any similarly advanced technology. Of course, the simple fact that a human is involved is not enough. That person needs to be properly trained and needs to function within a broader institutional culture where the state serves its where citizens serve the state, rather than the state imposing on its citizens. But human involvement is a prerequisite to any law enforcement or national security use of FRT that claims to advance the cause of human freedom. Finally, the Department of Justice will prioritize the security and quality of the data it uses in connection with facial recognition technology. The data involved in FRT, especially in the law enforcement context, can be highly sensitive. The FBI imposes strict access requirements to the relevant databases and complies with all applicable laws and regulations concerning the storage and retention of this data. In addition, it provides a secure transport mechanism for all the criminal history record information and biometric-related information it handles. The department will prioritize securing its face image and associated data from unauthorized access. State and local law enforcement partners, as well as commercial firms, should do the same. The American people, too, should be cautious about the products they use and with whom they share their biometric information. Any mobile application, even a free, fun, seemingly harmless one that entertains you, developed in a nation that does not share our rule of law values, could be a potential counterintelligence threat, especially based on the data that the app collects, its terms of use policies, and the legal mechanisms available to the host nation to access data within its borders. As Americans, we must never forget that our critical AI technologies, as well as our citizens' personal data, are under constant attack from strategic competitors, adversarial nations, and malicious, non-state cyber actors. So let me close by thanking you for participating in this important discussion regarding the future of law enforcement's use of facial recognition technologies. There are many complex and important questions that need to be resolved as this technology continues rapidly to advance around us. At the Department of Justice, we firmly believe the best way to answer these questions is through principled action, through an honest evaluation and constant re-evaluation of benefits and costs, and through active engagement with impacted stakeholders, including each of you. Only then can we ensure that the manner in which the government uses technology best serves the American people. Thank you again for the invitation to join you today.